Hi guys, today we are going to talk about 6.1 percents and decimals. So first of all, why are we learning about percents, decimals, and fractions? Well, we really talked about fractions and decimals before, so this one kind of focuses more on the percents, but we use percents along with the other two, fractions and decimals, on a daily basis when comparing prices, getting discounts, figuring out how much you want to pay for something or how much you need to pay for something. So we do see them, especially out in shopping or in trying to use your money on a day-to-day basis. We really use percents quite often. Our I can statement: I can write percents as decimals, write decimals as percents, and solve real life problems. All right. One of the things that we have, we've done this before, you did this last year. One thing I really want to focus on is how do we write that percent as a decimal? So the first thing we want to do is we want to remove the percent symbol. Okay, then we are dividing by 100, or we are moving the decimal point 2 places to the left. So that's really important to remember, that you are moving it to the left when you're going from a percent to a decimal. So for example, we have 23% here. So I'm going to drop my decimal point, or my percent sign. Sorry, that's the first step. Dropping my percent sign. And then I want to shift that decimal point. And if we don't see a decimal point, it's actually known that it is behind the last number. Then we're going to shift it to the left 2 places. So I'm going to go 1, 2. So that equals 0.23 as my decimal. Okay, we have a couple problems to practice here. We have 52% as a decimal. So I'm going to start by writing my percent, 52%, and then dropping or erasing that percent sign. Then I'm going to move that decimal point. Again, that decimal point is located behind that last whole number. We're going to shift it twice to the left, which means that 52% equals 52 hundredths, or 0.52. All right, we have our 7%. We want to drop our decimal, or I'm sorry, our percent sign, and our decimal is behind that 7. So that's where it's located right now. But here I want to move it 2 to the left. Well, there's only one number, but that means I'm going to put a 0 there in its place where the other number is not. So that means I'm going to have a 0.07, or a 7 hundredths as my answer, changing the 7% into a decimal. All right, go ahead and pause the video, and you have 4 try on your owns. All right, let's take a look at writing decimals as percents. So before we were dividing by 100, but this time we are actually going to be multiplying by 100. So we moved the decimal point to the left before, but when we're turning a decimal to a percent, we're going to multiply by that 100, or you move the decimal point 2 places to the right, and then you add a percent symbol. Okay, so we're going to take our decimal point. We have 0.36, or 36 hundredths, and we are going to shift the 0.36. We're going to shift that decimal point 2 to the right, and then we're going to add our percent sign. So we would get 36%. Okay, let's look at writing these four decimals into a percent. Okay, we have 0.47, or 47 hundredths. We are going to turn that into a percent. So I'm going to move my decimal point to the right 2 places, and I get 47%. Don't forget to add that percent sign. Here I have 663 thousandths. I'm going to move my decimal point only 2 to the left, 2 to the right. I'm sorry. We're going to go 2 to the right, 1, 2, and that equals 66.3%. So even though it didn't give us just a whole number, it did give us a decimal, we still need to write it down as is. Okay, we cannot just drop that 0.3. Okay, let's look at our B example, or I guess this would be C. Okay, we have 1.8. Well, again, I need to move it to the right. That's what I had done on each of these. I'd moved it 2 to the right. So I still need to keep that in mind as I'm doing this. So I'm going to take my decimal point and move it 2 to the right. 1, 2. And again, I don't have any number there, so I'm going to add a 0 that I have to use as kind of a placeholder. And this is going to equal 180%. So if you have a number that is written as a whole number with a decimal after it, you're going to get a percent that is over 100. And that's okay. You can have something that's over 100%. All right, our last one, we have 0.009 or 9 thousandths. And we're going to shift that decimal point over to the right 2 times. So we are going to end up with 9 tenths as our percent. So not even a whole percent. Okay. All right. Go ahead and pause the video and try the next few on your own. All right, let's look at example 3. It says writing a fraction as a percent and a decimal. So on a math test, you get 92 out of a possible 100 points. Which of the following is not another way of expressing 92 out of 100? Well, there's a couple different ways that we can do this. We do know that 92 out of 100 can be divided. Okay, so if I do 92 out of 100, that's going to turn into a decimal point of 0.92. So I know this one works. Well, we just talked about turning a decimal into a percent. So I can take my decimal form that I have and move these over 2 places, which is going to give me 92%. So I know this one will work. Then I have 2 fractions that I need to compare it to. So I want to go through and reduce as much as possible my 92 out of 100. If you use your calculator, you can do 2 ABC 100 and it will simplify it for you, or you can look to see what you can actually reduce it by. I see that both of them are even, so I can divide at least both of them by 2 to begin with. And I would get 46 out of 50. And then I could do that again, and I could divide both of them by 2 again because both of them are even. So that would give me a 23 out of 25. So A is also going to work. So the one that is not going to work would be C. All right, let's look at example 4 before we get to our next try on our own. Example 4 says the figure shows the portions of ultraviolet or UV rays reflected by 4 different surfaces. How many times more UV rays are reflected by water than by seafoam? So I can do a couple things here. I am looking at my seafoam and I want to figure out, this one is actually already as a percent, so I think I could leave it as a percent. And this one over here, I want to turn into a percent. So I could do a couple things. So if you have a calculator, you can absolutely divide 21 divided by 25. Or in my case, without a calculator, I can just multiply because 25 is easily able to go into 100. So how would I get from 25 to 100? I would multiply by 4. Whatever we have to do to whatever we do to one, we have to do to the other. Okay, so it's going to have 2 equal ratios here. So up here, we would also multiply by 4. And I would end up with 84 over 100. Okay, so that would give me a 0.84 or an 84%. So I'm going to do that. So I would get an 84% for the UV lights that are reflected from water. And then the seafoam is a 25%. So it says how many times more UV rays are reflected by water than by seafoam? So we can do some long division and we can take our 84% and divide that by our 25%. Okay, and those are our decimals. So we could change those from here and we could shift those decimal points over because whatever I do to the one, I have to do the other. So I would really get 84 and 25. Okay, so how many times can it go in here? So this is my decimal. It can go in 3, get 75, bring down or subtract, I get 9. Oops, let's undo that. So 3 times, we get 75. We get 9 left over. Put a 0 down. How many times can 25 go into 90? It can go in again 3. We get 75. We get 15. Bring down another 0. How many times can 25 go into 150? It can go in 6 times. And it actually takes us to 150, so then it's going to cancel out. Okay, so it would be 3.36 times more. Sorry, answer. Okay, go ahead and pause the video and try the last one on your own. The last two, sorry, 9 and 10.